Let's jump into the weekend's action. And where I want to start, a bit more thematically rather than game by game, is we'd like to do a little bit more, Jacob, is the notion of a barren run for a striker.
Yeah.
And how you manage that and how you bounce back from that and the mentality you have to keep pushing forward despite all the adversity that comes your way. And we had a number of strikers that broke their runs in terms of not scoring goals this weekend. And I think there's so many fascinating conversations here. So first of all, the likes of Al Hassan Toure, who granted played a little bit out on the wing, but he is a striker at points.
Yeah.
How he went from probably the worst hat-trick of misses in last weekend that we've seen in a while to scoring a hat-trick in this game against the Newcastle Jets, I honestly don't really know. He managed to complete it before he got subbed off around the 60th minute mark as well. His replacement was literally lining up, ready to take him off when he scored his third goal. To bounce back from just 1 week is incredible in terms of that dramatic swing is enough. But then you have the likes of Sam Cosgrove, who came into Auckland, big Englishman, big tall striker, supposed to get amongst it, be the fox in the box and score goals and really take a lot of responsibility for that goal scoring as well. And we hadn't seen the best of him so far. But they were talking about it on commentary throughout the game, and he seems non-fussed by it. And he keeps moving forward and he approaches games with the same level of confidence. And then he's here to open the scoring for Auckland. Similar with Harrison Sawyer. You know, he hasn't had as much opportunity, but this season under Milestiowski, he is that guy who is starting a lot of games in the focal point, and he had to use his height advantage to get the header off the corner as well. And then Luka Jovanovic, who's had to fill in the boots of Archie Goodwin, and even Nikos Virgos, who didn't score, thanks to be fair, what I think was a pretty good game from Matt Sutton in the glory net. He did try his hardest to get off that duck as well. But I just think it's so fascinating. There's so many different storylines around strikers. 5 years ago, we couldn't have any good Australian strikers. Now we've got them coming out the wazoo in terms of young attacking players making their mark in the league, and a couple of visas thrown in there as well.
Yeah, it was fun to watch from that perspective of, you know, seeing. I was even saying this right after, like last weekend, saying, you know, nobody's scored a lot of goals yet, and it feels like none of the strikers that we kind of will expect to see towards the top of the rankings at the end of the season are up there yet in terms of goals scored. And then this weekend, everybody's come out and put one in the back of the net. Toure's case put 3 in the back of the net, and I mean 3 great finishes as well on that too, which is just hilarious because you go back and look at the misses he had last week and that's the goals he scored this week, and you go, how's he managed that then? Like, it's not just turning around a poor game into a good game, it's turning around 3 really, you know, easy misses into 3 really difficult goals that he scored. But no, it was a tremendously impressive performance from him and from most of the, like you said, most of the strikers across the league. To be honest, it was just their weekend, clearly. And you know, I thought Sam Cosgrove, you brought up there, he was tremendous for Auckland, to be honest. Just such a physical presence in the box, and it felt like every time Auckland kind of put the ball in the box, in and around there, he was a big threat, obviously getting the goal from that set piece, from that wide free kick. But there were a couple other times throughout the game as well where they kind of worked the ball wide and got it back inside, and you know, it kind of felt like he was going to be a big threat for them. So I think if he can kind of keep that up, if Auckland can keep trying to find his forehead, you know, in the box above, because he towers over everybody, right? Like, I mean, you just you look at the goal he scored there, and it's, you know, I think it's marked up with like Ethan Allegich or someone who's just like,
I don't know what's going on there. I know you have the thing about Adelaide defending set pieces, but that's just like a mismatch you've just
complete mismatch. And I think that's the kind of thing that they can create, having him in their side, right? They can go, right, we know we've got somebody who's tall, who's got, you know, very strong heading ability. We can kind of put him where we want the ball to go, you know, and just see what happens. And you know, they got the goal there, very well done. And yeah, hopefully he can kind of kick on from that and be the goal scoring player that they need. And obviously, you know, that was the big question for Auckland. was like, you know, kind of they lost Max Matter, obviously, and it was like, you know, who's going to be the guy that's going to come in and take that role up? And if Cosgrove can kind of continue on that trajectory, then it seems like a good fit.
I think Jesse Randall as well, he's had a really good start to the season playing out left. He clearly, after scoring that goal, has just been given a license to pretty much shoot from wherever, because that's what he was doing against Adelaide in this game. But he actually would just create opportunities out of pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
You know, slightly weird angles, not the perfect body position, but you'd still be able to find a shot and get relatively good power on it. But he's another one of those players that has had to step up, and you're right.
He was unlucky not to score as well. His headed effort was off the post, and then it was put back in by Louis Verstraete. But yeah, he's such a threat. And it's crazy, right? Because last year people were talking about him as being, the big threat from Auckland, and it just seems like he's put in a lot of work clearly in the off season, and has come into this season absolutely firing on all cylinders. So it's great to see.
So a good win for Auckland against the Reds, who again they'll be killing themselves for that set piece. And the last goal I think was obviously so lucky. Like, it's just come off the post, it bounces back, it falls to Verstraete. But there you go. And a little fact on this game as well, you might have heard it in commentary, but Adelaide was the only team that Auckland didn't manage to beat last year, of course. So now in terms of the current active A-League teams, which we feel like we have to throw that asterisk on every time, Auckland have now got the set. So I'm not sure what the record books look like in that respect, but surely that's a pretty small amount of time for an A-League team to have beaten every other A-League team.
Yeah, obviously with the Wanderers, when they came in, were very strong. I think they'd probably be the only other candidate, to be honest, that could possibly have done it as quickly. I don't know, maybe somebody in the really early days like a Sydney, but yeah, no, they're definitely very impressive from Auckland. They've been clearly the strongest, I think, squad and team over the last season. So no, it's well warranted. And it's kind of funny you bring up the fact that both games last season were draws, and they were like dramatic draws as well, with late goals and lots of goals being scored, and refereeing controversy and all sorts. And I've seen some stuff on social media already from Auckland fans saying, like, obviously their biggest rivals are the Knicks. They're like, but if these games against Adelaide continue this way, moving forwards, where it's these close affairs, really tight encounters, it's like maybe Adelaide are going to be their like second rivals in a way, because it just seems like every time these two teams match up, it's a good game.
Absolutely. On to Harrison Sawyer then, and the Bulls, and the West Sydney derby as a whole, which apart from a slight point of grammar, which I want to kind of propose the idea of the West Sydney rather than the Western Sydney derby. I don't know why it feels like it differentiates it for me, but I think that game is rising in stature, and it should. And throw all the ironic jokes you want about this, is literally the point of MacArthur, is to kind of build this kind of rivalry. It has heat. It really does feel like, obviously the RBB travel well. There was a really good atmosphere from that side of the ground, and the game itself was brilliant. Obviously, the Sawyer goal early. Pantazopoulos had a very up and down game. Got moved out to the left towards the end, and then got the storming header home. But the atmosphere the entire time was great. And in terms of Sawyer and his position in the Bulls team, he really does have added responsibility this year. We think of the likes of Marin Yakalish, who got double-digit goals and assists last season. That's suddenly just gone. And the likes of a Jed Drew and a Holman, they're just not in the team anymore.
Yeah.
And Stajovski has clearly put a lot of responsibility on him to be the one scoring the goals. So for him finally to get underway in the A-League like that this season is definitely very valuable. And then on the other side, the Wanderers, yes, they've had a bit of a tough fixture run to start, but the pressure is seriously on, sitting bottom 2 after just 3 rounds.
Yeah, no, this was a great game, and between two teams that I think could have very strong seasons. Obviously, MacArthur and what they've been building, we're kind of hoping to see the results of that this season. And the Wanderers, kind of stabilised themselves a little bit last year after everything that had happened, and under Stadge looked to kind of try and become the Western Sydney of old in a way. And this was just another great encounter between these two teams. It seems like a lot of the time, especially when they're meeting in MacArthur, or rather Campbelltown, and you get that travelling Wanderers support. Like, it does, that does bring it up a level. And again, a great game. Harry Sawyer, I think he's an interesting one, isn't he? Right, because you remember when they brought him in from South Melbourne, and it was like partway through South Melbourne's cup run, right? Wasn't it?
Just before the semi-final.
Just before the semi-final, which kind of hampered them a little bit. But he was the big, if you're going to take a punt on an unproven Aussie striker, it's like there's nobody better to choose than Harry Sawyer at that point in time. And he came into MacArthur and didn't really necessarily get a huge number of opportunities last season to really, put himself into the position of being the starting number 9. But now, like you said, kind of no real option for Mile Stajovski other than to back the guy he signed, a season and a half ago in Harry Sawyer, and go, it's your job now. Go out there and show why, why we signed you in the first place. So yeah, it's great to get that goal under his belt. Hopefully we can see more of that from him. And I think that, it's also a case of for him being like, well, okay, I am cut out for this level. Like, I think that's something that kind of plays into it a little bit as well. When you've had a good career at the NPL level and you're making that step up to the A-League, and it takes a while to kind of open your account, you can kind of get into your own head a little bit, I'd imagine. So I think it'd be great for his mental, obviously, to get that goal, and it's great for MacArthur to go, right, our striker's scoring goals now, and that's going to be a huge benefit for us. Like you said, losing out on a lot of attacking talent in the off season with players that left the club, it does leave a big hole for them, and that's kind of still moving forwards for MacArthur going to be the big question mark of how are they going to score their goals this season. So Harry Sawyer, he's going to be their number one target for sure.
I love that you dropped the phrase "good for his mental" in the middle of that. Well done. I have an interesting question for you. When we talk about state of the game, building up engagement, building up fans, building up attendances and eyeballs and attention on the game.
Yeah.
How do you go about building a derby or building a rivalry? Because it's easy enough when, there's two teams in a city and it's very clear. Like the Melbourne derby and the Sydney derby and the F3, or when they were the only teams around at those locations.
Yeah.
In Melbourne's case, still now is. But for something like MacArthur Wanderers, obviously, it makes a lot more sense than MacArthur Sydney, but it's a little bit harder when, yes, you want this rivalry to be good because they're close to each other, which means it should be a rivalry, but the bigger brother is down the road in Sydney FC, kind of already staked their claim, and then we have a few of these other matchups in the A-League, like the Big Blue, like the distance derby, like the original rivalry that is based off kind of different dynamics rather than geography. Yeah. MacArthur Wanderers feels like it's starting to trend towards that. Like maybe the location, the West Sydney, has got us in the door, that it feels like maybe these last couple of games, it's actually starting to build up and the sporting competition itself is starting to feed into it.
I think that's, spot on, where it's like, convenient that they happen to both be kind of sharing or overlapping in some way, right, in terms of geography. But I don't think the Wanderers fans feel like MacArthur is really a threat in that kind of a situation of like, oh, they're stealing our fans, right? Like, I think that the Wanderers think highly enough of themselves to be like, that's not the case. We're the bigger club, we've been around for longer, we've got more fans, like, that's not the thing. But like you said, it's kind of has developed where it feels like, despite that, the fan bases have really bought into it, right? And I think that's what it takes. I mean, you look at, for instance, London, how many Premier League clubs there are in London, and every single one of them is called a London derby. But you think realistically, some of them nobody really actually cares about, right? But some of them have those really big, rivalries attached to it. You think, obviously the big one is the North London derby, right? So you kind of get these ones where, even in world football overseas, where clubs are based in the same city, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a massive rivalry there. But I think that what these two clubs have managed to do, and I think it just takes one fan base buying into it, right? Because that then spurs the other one on to be like, well, hang on, they think this is important, so we should as well. And then, it kind of goes from that. I think that's kind of what happened, right? Like the RBB were like, well, this is another close away day, so we can turn up in numbers, we're going to make a show, we're going to bring a lot of noise, a lot of colour. And then all of a sudden, that just adds to it, right? Because when you're watching it on TV or if you're there in person, you go, hang on, this feels like a big game now. And it just kind of builds from there, and year in, year out, we're expecting the Wanderers to travel well down to Campbelltown to support their team. And, it just, it's built into something more, I think, than it just being a game between two Sydney clubs, which, like you said, I don't think was ever really kind of the selling point for it. So, no, I think they've done a tremendous job in kind of letting it naturally grow without forcing it. Whereas I think, not to speak ill of the dead, but that's not necessarily what worked so well with Western United, right? Where they kept trying to push that this was a big game and it was important between, Western and Victory or Western and City. And it's like,
especially when you're just playing at Amy Park.
Exactly.
Like,
nobody buys into it, right? And it just like, it needs somebody to buy into it. And I think that just the fact that was being forced so hard kind of hurt it a little bit. Whereas with this one, it doesn't. They've not given it a cringy name like the Westgate Derby or whatever it was called, right? Like, they've just kind of let it happen.
Battle of the Bridge.
The Battle of the Bridge. They've just let it happen, and it's been successful. So I think that's kind of the lesson to take from this, right? Is that if you want these rivalries to happen, and I was just kind of talking before about Auckland and Adelaide, how that's almost kind of could become something if these kind of games continue. It's what's happened with Macarthur and Western Sydney. So no, it's great to see. We need more of these kind of these high sort of those tier 2, tier 3 games, right, in the league, where you've got your big derbies, your big rivalries, but then you've got these other games of importance that can kind of draw people's eyes to them and can kind of highlight around where maybe there's not a big game happening. And yeah, I think that they've absolutely nailed it so far with this one.
Finally on this one, Alan Stajic, a little bit of coach watch. Obviously, we've seen a lot of the rumours about John Aloisi. He's reportedly said no to Perth Glory. Part of that report was that also the likes of a Western Sydney, a Sydney FC, a Melbourne Victory could be on the lookout for him if that kind of they go down that path. Alan Stajic is one that I think we touched on the fixture run as being tough, and I think he does have a lot of credit in the bank from last year as well. But these results are not great to start the year.
No. It's just flat out not fantastic at all. But it does feel harsh though, right? Because they've managed to, they start out with a draw against City. They lose 1-0 away to Auckland. Like, that's a tough fixture to get anything from. I just think that what's killing them the most is that we're not seeing what we all thought we would see from them. And that doesn't have to come with the results necessarily, but they can play to a really high level in a game and still not come away with a result. And I just don't think we've seen even that yet. We've seen glimpses and we've seen bits and pieces here and there, but I think for the most part, they've been unable to sustain kind of their ceiling across a full 90 minutes, which, partners with why they've not found a result so far. So I think that's kind of also hurting Stadge a little bit, is that they've just not found their feet properly. And there's only so long that you can give into a season before you say, okay, it's not a case of not having found our feet. It's a case of our feet have been cut off and we don't have them anymore, right? So I think that's the thing that's been really difficult. I mean, they've got it's another difficult trip for them next week, Friday night in Adelaide. Adelaide themselves haven't obviously gotten off to the hottest of starts, so there's the potential for the Wanderers to get a result, but going to Cooper Stadium on a Friday night is not easy for most teams. So again, they start off, they're into a difficult fixture. It might not be until the following week against the Mariners at home where they might actually be able to kind of put up a performance, but by then you've got to really start asking questions, and I think those questions have already started about Stadge, which is a shame, because I think he's done a fantastic job with the Wanderers to kind of turn them around and get them into this position, right? And that's where he said he's got that in the bank, right? Where he can kind of go, well, yeah, but look where we were before I took over. It's a tough one.
He switched things up a little bit in this game.
Yeah.
Plenty of calls after the last couple of weeks. Steven Ugarkovic, what is he doing? So far forward, he pretty much played as a dual six alongside Thurgate, which worked. And then you kind of got, what was it, Borello and Krayev kind of out wide with Kuala and Barbaroussis up to the top. So a slight little change. It felt like a bit of a change from his 4-4-2 that he's been very wedded to. So there is movement a little bit going around. And obviously we talked about the change from Pantzopoulos out to left back and late in the second half as well. That clearly created more down that side. So things are happening, and again, as much as we talk about these three coaches, so Talle, Dials, and Stadge, I think he's okay for the moment. I think the credit in the bank is a big thing. He has had tough opposition. Give him a couple of months and then reassess. But expectations at Wonderland are always very high. He was only given a 1-year contract initially. So yes, he was rewarded at the end of last season, but how long will that last? While we're talking on coaches, let's go Ufuk Talay. So he obviously came into the season under a lot of pressure, loses on opening night to Adelaide, but beating the Jets 4-1, there is a lot of context to it. But for me, he's off the hook for a little chunk now. A comfortable victory last week against the Mariners as well. I don't think he can be considered a hot seat manager right now. Obviously, these things go up and down round by round. Can be very reactive, but this was convincing, right? Obviously Toure was in, I say, the right place, right time for two of them, and then just finished well.
Yeah.
And they capitalised on at least 3 very poor turnovers from the Newcastle Jets, which I say poor. It's poor to give away in that moment, not necessarily poor to play that way, which I think we'll get to. But I definitely think for Sydney, a number of individual improved performances as well. Tisserand, I thought was
he
was
had
brilliant.
a much better game.
Yeah, best we've seen from him. Ryan Grant was back to his best out of right back, I thought. And you got Paul Ocon, who's that, again, he's that defensive midfielder that they were crying out for last season. So all of a sudden, after a little early wobble on opening night, Sydney FC starting to look the part again.
Yeah, and we're kind of talking about as well with these 2 fixtures, the Mariners and the Jets. Tale's got to get a result in at least one of them to kind of keep the pressure off of him, and he manages to get the results in both games. So I think that's a huge huge monkey off his back in a way, and like you said, it lets him kind of sit a little bit more comfortably moving forwards now, as they get into kind of the next 3 weeks are going to be a tough run of games for them, with Macarthur victory and Sydney derby up. So it's
and then a big blue.
And then a big blue after that. So, yeah, look, it's not going to get easier for him, but I think getting these results in now is huge. And, yeah, like I said, kind of takes that pressure off, but he's got to make sure that he maintains that form moving forwards through those tough fixtures where, those are the fixtures that really matter for the fans, right? Where it's like, if you're losing in a Sydney derby, if you're losing a big blue, like, the fans are not going to let you forget that. So, I think it's good to show that, they can get these kind of results now. And like you said, it just looked like a much improved team in general. And I did kind of question that in round 1 after they lost to Adelaide. How much of this is Sydney aren't good? How much of this is it's round 1? And they've just not had that chance to really work together and get things embedded, and a couple of players that looked maybe not 100% match fit, Marcel Tisserand being one of them, and now round 3 he's having a fantastic game. So yeah, I feel like maybe some of that panic that was kind of around Sydney to start the season, maybe was a little bit premature, but it's a tough run of fixtures now, so that could come back very easily if he doesn't get results moving forwards too. But no, it's great to get those results for him, and I think hopefully it's not a case like it was last season where we see them get these kind of 4-1 wins and things like that, and we go, this is what they can be at their best, and then they never kind of really reproduce it over the next couple of weeks, and you go, right, yeah, that's why they're sitting outside of finals, like it just, I think there's that consistency they need to find. And I think with the acquisitions they made in the off season, it should help them find that. They've got good depth this season. They've addressed a big issue obviously with that 6 in Ocon Engsler, who's been tremendous for them. Piero Quispe is starting to come into his own now as well in the centre of midfield. So
Joe Lolly looks like the best player in the league again at right wing.
Yep. Who would have thought that putting him in the correct position has him playing amazingly again? It just feels like maybe they're going to find that consistency this season, whereas last season, especially with their Asian commitments, it felt like that was never really possible. So obviously, again, while it was premature to say to write their season off after round 1, it's premature to say that they're going to win the league or anything after 2 good results, but it's good to see them get those results, and good for Tale as well to have that pressure off him for at least a little while.
And then on the other side, the Jets come crashing down to earth a little bit. I'd argue a lot more so than the defeat to the Mariners in round 1, which had a lot of just fortune and luck written all over it. It brings up an interesting argument, and I'm going to put the Wellington Phoenix in this boat as well, because obviously they've come out with this very adventurous highline style.
Yeah.
And it's the question of style versus results. And every time I watch the Jets, I just have Ange Postecoglou in my head going, first you need to suffer. And they give away these balls and they can see these silly goals. And I'm thinking, you know what? Give them 10, 15 rounds and they're not going to make those mistakes. I know it's a young group, but you think of the likes of it, Acosta Grozos in midfield who gave up the ball for the first goal. He's not going to make that mistake in 3 months' time. So
but do you get 3 months in the A-League, Lachie? From everything we've seen, you don't get that kind of liberty, right?
No, but you do, because who's getting relegated? How many finals positions are there? Newcastle Jets are not a club that's going to sack a coach like Mark Milligan after he's won the Australia Cup. He could finish dead last this season. He's still going around again. And I know it's an inexperienced squad, but you can just see the potential. And with Wellington, you can see it as well. And
Yeah.
I thought they were great against the Mariners. They were very unlucky not to win that game. It was a bit of a lucky goal. And you can see them building towards something as well. But then you compare that with like an Auckland, who don't play in the most attractive way, but they just keep winning, keep getting results.
It's the eternal debate in football, to be honest, of would you rather play beautiful football and not necessarily always get results, or play the most boring, dour football known to man, but win everything. That was obviously the big discussion with towards the end of Gareth Southgate's tenure as head coach of England, being like, it's such boring football with such great players, but he gets the results right, and he's getting them to finals of international tournaments. Yeah, Auckland, they are so capable of playing amazing football, but they just almost don't have to, right? And they know it. They could just be kind of comfortable, play it safe, and know they can get a result. Look, I'm a big fan of coaches trying something new and trying to be different and trying to play exciting, fun to watch football. And I think especially in the case of, the Jets and the Phoenix, is trying something because just being normal kind of hasn't worked for them in the past, right? Like, you look at last season for the Knicks, right? And it's like, right, clearly this kind of hyper, conservative five at the back, let the opposition have the ball and try and hit them on the counter. It's a bit long in the tooth now. Teams know how we're going to set up. We're going to try and be different, and we're going to try something new and exciting. With the Jets, it's, well, we've got these young players who are really talented, maybe a little bit inconsistent at times, but let's try and put them in positions to let them thrive and kind of, show the best of them. I like that. I think that's a really admirable thing to do, but it is a results-based business at the end of the day, and if you're not getting results, it can be very difficult to justify that, as we've seen with Ange Postecoglou, right? Where, obviously that Forest tenure, doesn't matter the kind of football you play, if you don't get a win in 8 games, that's going to be a difficult way to start the season. So, it's a debate that will always go on, to be honest, and everybody would want to play beautiful football that wins games, but that's not always possible, right? So it is, you got kind of got to find a balance there at times, and that'll come with both teams, I think, with both the Jets and the Phoenix. And from the Phoenix, I think that it's been nice to see, because it has kind of gotten them results right. I mean, they've got 2 draws and a win. Maybe not lit the world on fire with the teams that they've had to play, being Perth, Brisbane and the Mariners, but compared to last season, that's a massive improvement. And it just, it feels like it's the kind of thing that was needed. And with the Jets, I think it's not down to necessarily the system being a problem, but it just being these inexperienced young players, right? And a young squad, not having necessarily played this way before. There were a couple of individual errors that kind of swayed the momentum of the game there. You said, obviously, Sydney capitalised on a couple of turnovers. And it's just, both of these ways of football from both the Phoenix and the Jets, I think, are going to be fine, like you said, in the long term, or at least I hope so, because it'll be more fun to watch for the league and it'll be better football. But I think it's just these little bedding in issues that we're seeing now. I think for the Knicks, there really hasn't been too many big issues that scream out. Obviously, it's just the case of you're playing with a high line. There's obvious risks that come with that. And I think that for the most part, they've been okay in dealing with that. There was which game was it? The Brisbane game, I think, where there was the swirling winds and it was doing all sorts for them. And that was a little bit difficult to manage. But I think for the most part, they've been kind of okay with it. Hopefully in the long term, it works out, because especially from a neutral perspective, it's having more fun, different ways of playing football in the league. It's going to be so much better than watching, Auckland trot out in a 4-3-3 and just, kind of just control the game and slow play it and just convert the couple of chances they make a game. Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? It's getting them the results, and they're one of the toughest teams in the league to play. But having more fun football is obviously always going to be a benefit.
Yeah, and to be fair to Sydney in the Jets game, their pressing structure caused a lot of those turnovers.
Yeah.
They pressed really well. It's not like that really high intensity kind of press. It's just well structured, knowing the passing lanes and forcing Newcastle into positions where they're going to be under pressure, and if they do turn it over, Sydney are going to have a good counter-attack going the other way. And the Jets will build into that, and they'll get more comfortable being in those areas. I think that's just the key. And Milligan said, what was it, in the F3 derby, it felt like towards the end of the game that the players kind of lost faith in what they were doing.
Yeah.
The positive definitely out of the last few weeks has been that they've kept that all the way through. Against Victory, absolutely. And then here in a losing situation, they kept going, which will be positive for him.
And I think that's the thing, right, is if you can stick to your principles even in a really bad loss, I think that's a good sign that you're getting the players to buy into it, right? You know, it's easy to stick with something that's working, and when you're winning 5-2 against the Victory, it's working. Of course, everybody's going to stay playing that way. So I think the fact that, yeah, like you said, they kind of stuck with it in a 4-1 loss, it's a good sign.
Yeah, and Wellington aren't there either. I think obviously the clear mistake they made in the first 2 rounds was they had poor timing on some of the defensive runs, right? Like the ball goes in over the top at the wrong moment and they're just dead. I think they made the other mistake where they had 1 or 2 moments where one singular defender actually went early. So it meant that there was one, I feel bad for picking on him, Isaac Hughes, because there were a couple of other players as well. But I just remember this one ball goes over the top. Isaac Hughes reads that long ball is coming and actually makes a few steps before the ball is played, which allowed who was alongside him to get that extra couple of meters compared to the rest of the defensive line.
Yeah.
The difference there is if you get that wrong, you still have a 1-on-1 to defend compared to when you get it wrong the other way, you've got to play in behind and they concede 2 goals in the first 2 weeks. So the Phoenix aren't there either, but it's these kind of styles that have a high ceiling if and when you get it right.
Yeah. And
do you think they can win, the Phoenix and the Jets playing this way in the A-League? Do you think they could win a championship?
I think it's their best bet to win a championship. I don't think the Jets or the Phoenix could win a championship playing like Auckland. You know, for a combination of reasons. I don't think that they've got the squad to play like that. And I don't think that they kind of have the like mentality to play like that either. I think they want to play fun football. So I think it's their best shot at winning a championship is to do something very different and to do something a little bit more radical. Will it work? I mean, we're yet to see it, right? We're yet to see it. And I think that's the thing. I think the proof's in the pudding for the moment, where it's like, maybe it will work later on in the season and, you know, they'll pick up results and they, you know, both teams feasibly, I think, can make runs at the finals. But it just, sometimes the pragmatic approach, it's, you know, a lot better in the short term because you just get those results immediately. Yeah, like I said, I think it's their best shot at winning a championship is to do something very different. Kind of how it worked for Adelaide, right? You know, Gombau comes in, changes the entire philosophy of the way the club's going to play football. A couple of years later, they win the championship. And it's like, sometimes it just needs that. You just need to change drastically the way you're doing things, especially for a smaller club, and you'll get that success. But it's not guaranteed, so.
Yeah. All right, moving along. Now, I'm not sure how you felt about this, but Sunday's game I thought was great. Saturday was a great stretch. Friday night absolutely bored me. I won't lie. The games weren't as fun. Simple as that. Victory Perth. 2-0 win for Victory. Coach watch. Dillers. I feel like it doesn't really move the dial that much. I feel like he loses a lot if he loses, but a 2-0 win, kind of as you were.
What you expect, right? Like you want the Victory to be beating Perth 2-0. So when your coach is under pressure, as the reports were in the build up to this one, that if he doesn't get the result over Perth, there's going to be serious questions asked of him. I think a 2-0 win is about what they would have expected. I think, you know, had it been like a 5-0, a 6-0, right, a really big, dominant, booming win where they control absolutely everything, yeah, sure, maybe then you can give a bit of credit to Dillis, but I think that this is just a bit of the status quo for him, and it doesn't, like you said, move the needle at all.
I think the big positive is, and I say this as a Melbourne Victory supporter, right? There is a lot of really exciting young talent coming through that's really exciting, and not... actually, I don't think any of it has actually come from our academy, which is a completely different issue. But we've always had the odd player, you know, like the Valupalays, who's been great for a number of years now. But having a Keegan Jelassic score 2 goals in the season so far. Mac
Still can't get over that's how his name's pronounced.
Yeah, to be fair, credit to Teo Pellizzeri. I think the line in commentary was like, the artist formerly known as Jelacic scores his goal. But Keegan Jelacic, you have the likes of Matt Grimaldi, who started on the wing as well, who was superb.
He got assists for both goals, didn't he? I think.
Yes, he got 2 assists, didn't he? Yep. So he did well. Jordi Valadon always good. You have the likes of Josh Sarah starting at right back, who started the season exceptionally as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. They're clicking. Juan Mata scores his first goal.
Yeah, he gets the goal. There you go.
People were saying potentially his best game in the A-League. Probably hard to disagree.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think he's really had many other games where he's played that number of minutes and contributed. So
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a statement on how he was used at the Wanderers, right?
Yeah.
So the midfield shift to have Jean Rowe at the 6, partnering Valadon with Mata ahead. That's kind of the way I thought they were going to do it at the start of the season. Initially, Christian was right with Jean Rowe playing forward.
Playing front,
but I think if you're in a position where Mata is fit to play and start, having him as a roaming 10 with Jean Rowe and Valadon in behind, I think is chef's kiss. I think that's the optimal form.
Being able to also, though, Mata's not fit, we can play Jean Rowe as the 10 and he'll do a job for us. And it's not just like, we're kind of relying on an academy product or whatever, or a youth player to come in and fill that spot. It's Denis Jean Rowe. That's such a absolute gift for the Victory to have. But I like Jean Rowe in that deeper role where he can kind of be that conduit between defense and attack, and dictate the tempo of the game and change the way that the ball's progressed and things like that through those central channels. I think that's what he's absolutely cut out to do for this Victory side. So yeah, the more that Mata can stay fit and start games, I think the better Victory are going to be.
Perth started bright, but to be honest, after they conceded that goal, it felt like they were kind of falling away a bit. They had one chance, maybe 88th, 89th minute, that was probably could have been a goal, which just changed the complexion. But I think for them, it really starts whenever they get this new manager in. Now, we've heard more reports. John Aloisi has said no to Perth Glory. I believe that was Marco Monteverde. And also that his brother, however, Ross Aloisi, is part of the candidates proposed to potentially take over. However, Patrick Kisnorbo, who we did mention last week, appears the most likely to take the position from here. And I think this is pretty much what we expected, right? John Aloisi, why would he really go to Perth? We talked about the other big three, Dillis, Talay and Staj. One of those clubs, as soon as they lose a coach, Aloisi would be number one for sure. So someone like a Kisnorbo, who again has to, let's be honest, come back to Australia with his tail between his legs. That's a more appropriate job for someone in his position.
100%. Yeah, it's not like his stocks are super high and he's going to have opportunities elsewhere. It's kind of that case of, well, just got to come back and, hope everyone can forgive me and, get this opportunity. And it'll be interesting to see how he does at Perth if he does end up joining them. Could be interesting given the squad that they've kind of put together, and how Kisnorbo likes to play football. Obviously, he's a product of the City Football Group, so the way that we expect those teams to play, that kind of 4-3-3, just a very solid kind of possession-based football team. The Glory cut out to do that? Well, we'll find out. But no, it's it definitely seems a more sensible option from both parties, I think. To bring PK in than John Aloisi, because Aloisi from his end, like I said, why would he join Perth when there will probably be a better opportunity coming his way? And from Perth's opportunity, it's like, it just seems like a bit of an overreach. Like sometimes you just gotta know you're gonna put the feelers out there and say, are you interested? But you kind of know deep down it's not a realistic target. Let's have a look elsewhere and find somebody who's actually gonna kind of fit a little bit better. So
I think let's let Perth get their new coach, give them a couple of weeks, and then we can make another true assessment of where they're going to be at. Finally, we had a good quote from Aurelio Vidmar after the Brisbane game, the 0-0, of course, up there on Friday night in Brisbane.
Yeah.
It was asked about the whole physical tag, and it's been a bit of this storyline, and I think he had a really good response, and he pretty much said, no, they don't deserve it. Like, if a team is not being physical, I think the line was, then they have rocks in their brain because they're not doing everything they can to try and win, which I really liked. And I could link this back to the state of the game and the fact that the players know each other a lot and they're kind of all pushing towards let Australian football be great. So there's not as much animosity. So sometimes, not that they pull their punches, but there's a lot of, little smiles and high fives and helping people up off the ground that kind of goes against that physicality. Yeah. And Brisbane, I think what they've just done is just very, unpolitely and very aggressively just said, no, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Well, you're our opponent. You're not our friend. As much as we want football to be good, we still want to beat you, right? I'm not going to help you up off the ground. You can get your teammate to do that, So, no, I agree. I think that it was a good comment from Vidmar. Interesting, you mentioned pulling punches, because that's kind of exactly what happened. Of course, there was that little bit of a scuffle. I think it was all kicked off by Atkinson, wasn't it? No punches thrown, which,
He really shouldn't be picking the ball up there. It's just, what's coming for you, to be honest.
It's almost like he's trying to incite something there, and I don't know, maybe he's like, oh well, this could then really buy into the Brisbane the bullies of the league kind of storyline that's going along. If we get them to kind of pick a fight with us, and then it just kind of didn't work out that way, did it? Everyone was kind of like, what are you doing, Atkinson, you idiot? Nobody felt sorry for him, so kind of backfired spectacularly there. But no, I agree. I think that Brisbane just been. It's just like, well, it's football at the end of the day, right? You don't see this. You don't see this a lot in football, where everybody's always super friendly with one another and stuff. It's like sometimes you've just got to treat your opponent like an opponent. Off the pitch, sure, and even after the game, be friendly and cordial and all that sort of stuff. But during the 90 minutes that you're playing, why would you ever want to give your opponent help? Especially in a game, like a game against Melbourne City where it's 0-0 or whatever, you don't want to help them out. What do you mean? So no, I agree. I think Vidmar spot on in his kind of his response there, that every team is physical in some way or another, and if they're not being physical, they're probably not winning games, so nobody's concerned with them anyway.
And Melbourne City, if I'm not wrong, they had either the most fouls or most yellow cards last season.
You want to talk about a physical team, yeah.
Melbourne City, absolutely. And I think, I don't know how to make this comparison, but there's a difference when you consider yellow cards. Obviously, they're supposed to be punitive, right? They're supposed to be don't do this again. What I think the best coaches do, and best players as well, and you see this all over the world, right? Cards are not punitive; they're a resource.
Yes.
So the mindset is not, oh, if I do something bad, then maybe I get a yellow card. It is, in certain situations, I have a yellow card to burn.
Yes. Yeah.
If someone is breaking through the midfield, then once a game, I get to just stop their attack, and that is how they think of the yellow card. Good or bad, whatever. Maybe we bring blue cards in and it shifts, whatever. But that is what the best players and the best coaches do. They use the resources available to them in a game. The resource is a player, it is energy levels, it is tactical knowledge, it is shooting ability, it is a yellow card. That is another resource that is available to teams to try and win games of football. So as I said, I love it. I love the attitude of Brisbane.
I think this is another important distinction to make. And I think this is kind of where things have maybe rubbed Val Canis the wrong way too, is there's a difference between being a physical team and being an undisciplined team. And
100%.
I think that's where this has all kind of blown up from, is that, Brisbane can be a physical team without being ill-disciplined. Yes, they had that double yellow in round one or whatever it was, and that wasn't a great look, but that wasn't, the team as a whole. That was an individual mistake that caused that. The way that Brisbane play isn't conducive to receiving more cards than anybody else. And as you mentioned, if you want to look at anybody who gets a lot of yellow cards and concedes a lot of fouls, it's Melbourne City, so you don't hear that kind of conversation about them. So I think that's also kind of where things have taken the wrong turn, where it's, this discussion is about them being a physical team, when really what they're trying to say is they're ill-disciplined, but they're not, right? They're not ill-disciplined, they are physical. That's not a bad thing.
100%. And then on City as well, I made the comment after the 4-1 against Perth, and I'm like, that result didn't do anything for me. Like they
Yeah.
smashed Perth by 4. There were 2 individual errors and 2 long-range bombs. That does not solve your issues of creating chances in the final third, of your wingers still not potentially being up to the top level in terms of being that piece to jump in and around and create those opportunities. And I think this Brisbane game was evidence of that. Brisbane didn't make it easy for them, of course. Again, why should they? But I still think there's lots of question marks, and they have to go to Japan this week and play Makita Zelvia on, I think it's Tuesday night, Mitchell Duke's team in the Champions League Elite. And again, you know, you think about the game against Kobe, right? That was a really good defensive performance where they almost got a point, and then the game against Buriram, you know, they got 2 late goals to go on and win it, which with really some individual brilliance from Caputo late on. So I'm still not convinced at City. I know a lot of people have them really high up the table in terms of their predictions where they think they're going to be, but I still feel like as much as they've been solid, they don't spark a lot of confidence in terms of the final third ability to really push on.
I feel like we were having this exact same conversation last season, and then they go on and they win the championship. So, I mean, we're having that discussion earlier about, you know, form over function, function over form, what's better for a football team. And for City, they're one of those ones who can just kind of be unconvincing, get results that are needed, and then, you know, kind of almost save it all for the end of the season, and go on a run in the finals and win it all. So, look, no, Asia's going to be a big hamper to them again. You know, it's been a while since they've been there. It was 2 seasons, I want to say.
2 seasons ago.
So kind of, basically a different squad from that point in time, different coach. So it'd be interesting to see how they kind of, that interacts with their league preparations, because they then turn it around from Tuesday night to then, you know, the big game on Saturday being the Melbourne Derby. So that's huge for them. But no, I do agree. Like, we've not seen anything that screams these guys are going to dominate the league this season, right? But I think that's the conversation we have about City most seasons is, you know, there's never anything that really goes, at least recently, maybe, you know, 5 years ago or whatever, when they were, you know, kind of just a consensus to finish top every season. It's kind of changed since then. The landscape of the league has changed a little bit. City is still a very good team, but nothing that screams these guys are going to win every single game. Nobody stands a chance against them. They feel vulnerable, and with Asia added into the mix, you never know.
So it'd be remiss of us not to look forward a little bit as well. So obviously Melbourne City on the Tuesday night of the Champions League Elite. The Bulls are hosting Kongan Hanoi, Stephen Malk's team, on Thursday night, which is going to shape up to be a very important game in the ACL too. And then obviously Derby weekend, Derby season, as Robbie Thompson coined it on the weekend, starts this week. So we've got the New Zealand Derby at 5 o'clock on the Saturday, and then the Melbourne Derby. And I think where all these 4 teams are at provides for some very fascinating contests. You have the excitement of the way Wellington are playing, good or bad, exciting undoubtedly, going up against an Auckland team that kind of represent the opposite of that. And of course, Wellington have never won a derby after, you know, apart from the last minute winner in the first one last season. It felt like it's been Auckland all the way. And now the teams are a little closer on the ladder, granted only 3 rounds, but a little closer than they were towards the matchups in the second and third derby last season. And then you have a Melbourne derby with a Melbourne City side that, again, we just touched on, haven't really been able to get it all clicking in the final third. Melbourne Victory side that really haven't had it all going for them, but they feel like they're building in. How representative is a 2-0 over Perth Glory? Who knows? But part of the excitement of the early season derbies is that there are all those unknowns. So the more you talk about it, the more it feels like a 50-50. So you have that kind of excitement of what's going to happen. But that's going to be a great day of football on Saturday afternoon and evening.
For sure. And I think it's better than scheduling these kind of games round one as well as has happened in the past, because you get a chance for the teams to at least be match fit. Whereas as we've spotted this season, a couple of teams came into the season clearly not prepared. So, you know, it gives a chance for at least everybody to go, kind of no excuses, right? Early season, everybody's fit, let's go at it. But yeah, start of these big derby matches now moving forwards, and there's kind of two more as well this week as well. You've got Sydney and Macarthur in the other Sydney derby, and Adelaide and Western Sydney in the We Both Hate Sydney FC derby. So it's gonna be great weekend of football. But no, that Saturday is gonna be blockbuster. I can't wait. They had a countdown to the New Zealand derby during the Auckland Adelaide one. They had a clock at the bottom of the screen.
I'm not sure I love the whole countdown thing on the Paramount broadcast.
That's just that. Yeah, no, I wasn't a fan of that. But you know, it goes to show that this has been it was a huge fixture last season, and it worked really, really well. So I'm excited to see how it goes now, and it's fourth iteration now, but second season with two teams that it feels like the Knicks might be a little bit more evenly matched for Auckland this season. Who knows? And then Melbourne derby always an exciting occasion. It's one of those big fixtures in the league that you kind of circle and go, right, we'll make sure we watch this one, and hopefully everyone behaves themselves and it's all good and fine. But no, it should be a great Saturday,
especially after last season's grand final.